Imagine waking up one morning to find a private secret suddenly splashed across the world. Not just a rumor, but a story backed by someone the entire royal family knows, someone with insider access, connections, and influence. Now, imagine that the secret isn't small. It's explosive. It challenges everything you thought people believed about you, about your family, about your life. That's exactly where Prince Harry and Meghan Markle found themselves when Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, stepped forward with revelations that would shake palace walls, scandalize the tabloids, and send social media into a frenzy. And the most shocking part? The story didn't just involve yachts or glittering parties. It touched upon intimate, almost unthinkable allegations that could leave the monarchy reeling. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The first whispers of the story were enough to make Harry see red. Anger, disbelief, panic, all collided in a way that made him snap. He didn't just argue. He confronted. He questioned. He demanded answers. And in that heated exchange, words were said that might never leave the confines of that private room. Words that, if leaked, could redefine the public's understanding of Meghan Markle and even her ties to some of the most controversial figures in the royal saga. But before we dive into the confrontation, let's set the stage. Picture this. The world sees Meghan as a poised, almost untouchable figure. A duchess who has faced the press, scrutiny, and public opinion with grace. They see Harry as a former prince, a war veteran, someone who has learned to protect his family fiercely. They see a couple trying to carve out a life outside royal constraints, yet still bound by expectations, obligations, and the ever-watchful eyes of the media. Then comes Sarah Ferguson, known for her own controversies, yet still a figure with access, credibility, and insider knowledge. Ferguson's revelation about Meghan's past on a luxurious yacht, a world of glitz, private parties, and high-profile mingling, didn't just hint at indiscretions. It exposed behaviors that could challenge the narrative of Meghan's carefully curated image. Social media exploded. Headlines screamed. Gossip columns ran with every angle. And Harry's reaction was immediate, visceral, and unforgettable. The tension wasn't just about public perception. It was personal. Every revelation carried weight. Every detail threatened to unravel a life carefully reconstructed away from the glare of Buckingham Palace. And then, as if the yacht revelation wasn't enough, Ferguson dropped another bomb. A question about Prince Andrew, one that sent shockwaves through Harry and Meghan's circle. Allegations that had long been whispered in hushed tones suddenly entered the light. And Harry's response? Fury, denial, confusion, a cocktail of emotions that no public statement could fully contain. At this point, you might be asking, why does this matter now? Why, in 2025, are these stories resurfacing with such intensity? The answer is simple, yet complicated. The royal family is under scrutiny like never before. Every move, every word, every glance is dissected and debated. Public fascination with the monarchy isn't just about royalty. It's about the human stories behind the crowns, the palace doors, and the perfectly staged photo ops. Meghan and Harry's journey, from fairy tale romance to exiled royals, is a narrative filled with triumphs, controversies, betrayals, and moments of intense vulnerability. Ferguson's revelations didn't just reopen old wounds. They injected fresh tension into an already volatile mix, leaving the question, can any private life survive in the glare of public obsession? And here's where the curiosity gap widens. The yacht story itself was only the beginning. The world was ready for drama, but nobody could have predicted the layers that would emerge next. Allegations connected to Prince Andrew. Private confrontations between Harry and Meghan that reportedly escalated to shouting, accusations, and cold silences. Media leaks that painted the couple in an entirely new, more vulnerable, more human light. Social media debates that turned personal narratives into battlegrounds. Each revelation teased a deeper story, a hidden truth, a piece of the puzzle that demanded to be understood. You might wonder, what exactly did Harry say when he snapped? What were Meghan's reactions in the private moments that nobody saw? How did Sarah Ferguson, herself no stranger to controversy, frame her revelations, and why did she choose this particular moment to speak? And perhaps the most haunting question, what does this all mean for the monarchy, for public perception, and for the personal lives of those at the heart of it? Here's a shocking fact. Royal insiders say that moments like these, confrontations, revelations, secrets laid bare, don't just happen randomly. They are catalysts, sparks in a highly charged environment that can set off chain reactions affecting everything from public opinion to family dynamics. Every word uttered, every accusation hinted at, every glance interpreted incorrectly or intentionally amplified has the potential to escalate into full-blown crises. And when you mix history, personal betrayal, and the relentless gaze of global media, the result is explosive. Let's not underestimate the human element here. Harry and Meghan are not just headlines. They are people. People who love, fear, defend, and sometimes lash out. People who have faced relentless scrutiny and yet continue to navigate a world that refuses to let them rest. And when Sarah Ferguson, someone with proximity to the family and credibility in certain circles, releases details that expose private behavior in such a public way, the impact is immediate and profound. It's no wonder that Harry's reaction was so intense. The stakes were high, not just for image, but for trust, loyalty, and the very fabric of personal relationships. Now imagine the setting. A private room in a residence far from the palace. The tension thick, words ricocheting off walls, voices rising and falling, emotions raw and unfiltered. Meghan, poised but defensive. Harry, furious and desperate to protect. Ferguson's revelations looming like storm clouds. And somewhere in the background, the unspoken specter of Andrew, a figure whose past scandals have already cast long shadows over the family. This is not tabloid fodder. This is a personal crisis, played out in real time, with global eyes inevitably watching the aftermath. So why does this story grip us? Because it's relatable, on some level. Secrets, betrayals, confrontations, and the desperate need to protect loved ones. These are universal themes. But magnified in the context of royalty, where privacy is a luxury and every action has historical significance, the drama becomes compelling, almost cinematic. The tension isn't just narrative, it's emotional, ethical, and psychological. As we explore the full story, you will see layers upon layers of intrigue. The yacht revelations, Harry's explosive reaction, the whispers about Prince Andrew, the palace's internal calculations, and the media's relentless pursuit of sensational headlines. Each chapter will bring new information, deeper insight, and emotional intensity. You'll be challenged to consider what you believe about loyalty, love, truth, and public perception. And just when you think the drama might settle, another revelation will surface, keeping you on the edge of your seat. By the time we reach the first chapter, you'll understand not just what happened, but why it matters, and how one revelation can set off a cascade of events that affect not only the individuals involved, but the broader perception of an institution that has survived centuries. You'll also begin to see the contradictions. Meghan as a poised public figure versus a private individual with secrets. Harry as a protective husband versus a man struggling with anger and loyalty. Ferguson as both a friend and a provocateur. And here's the mini cliffhanger to end this introduction. Just as Harry processed the yacht revelation, the room went silent. No words were spoken for a heartbeat. Then came a question, whispered, that changed everything. You slept with Andrew? The weight of that question, the implications, and the shock that followed are the doorway into the story you are about to experience. A story of secrets, confrontations, scandals, and the high-stakes drama of one of the world's most scrutinized families. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Imagine being on a yacht. The sun is setting, painting the horizon in gold and crimson. The waves lap gently against the hull. Glasses clink. Laughter floats through the air. Champagne sparkles in the last rays of daylight. Everything seems perfect, glamorous, carefree, untouchable. Now imagine that this scene, so effortlessly luxurious, hides a secret, a past nobody expected to resurface. A story so explosive that it could shatter images, reputations, and relationships. This was the world Sarah Ferguson alluded to when she first spoke about Meghan Markle's yacht history. And when Harry heard about it, the reaction wasn't calm. It wasn't measured. It was visceral. He snapped. He saw red. He confronted. But what exactly happened on those yachts? What were the details so carefully obscured, only now coming to light? Insiders say these weren't ordinary social gatherings. These were private, high-profile parties where the elite mingled, secrets were exchanged, and behaviors were carefully curated to impress, and sometimes manipulate, the right people. Meghan was not just a guest. She was part of a narrative that few understood. The press never covered it. The public never saw it. And the monarchy certainly didn't want it to leak. Until now. Some reports hint at luxury beyond imagination. Personal chefs, exquisite wines, exotic locations, and the kind of networking that most people only see in movies. But beneath the glittering surface lay tension, whispered conversations, and choices that, if revealed, could paint even the most poised figure in a controversial light. The yacht was more than a vessel for leisure. It was a microcosm of power, influence, and temptation. And Harry? He saw it all. Or rather, he learned about it secondhand, and that was enough. Anger, disbelief, protective instinct, they all collided. Imagine reading something about the person you love, someone you trust, that suggests a life you never imagined, one that might affect not only her reputation but your family, your children, your legacy. That was Harry in that moment. The yacht revelations weren't just about luxury or parties. They hinted at behaviors that challenged Meghan's public persona. Independence, ambition, charm, and audacity in ways that some insiders considered provocative. Sarah Ferguson's framing of the story made it impossible for Harry to ignore. She didn't just describe events. She contextualized them in ways that implied risk, scandal, and personal choices that could, if misunderstood, devastate reputations. And then there was the question of timing. Why now? Why choose this moment, years after the events supposedly took place, to speak publicly? Insiders speculate that Ferguson's motives were a mix of loyalty, honesty, and perhaps a touch of opportunism. The palace, already strained by public scrutiny, had no room for another storm. And yet, storms have a way of finding the cracks in the walls. The details that Ferguson shared were enough to ignite the media and social conversation. Tabloids splashed headlines about Meghan's yacht parties, glamorous lifestyle, and rumored liaisons. Social media exploded. Memes circulated. Public opinion polarized almost instantly. Some defended her fiercely, citing ambition and independence as virtues. Others saw scandal, betrayal, and moral ambiguity. And through it all, Harry remained caught in the eye of the storm, trying to protect, defend, and, most importantly, understand the truth. But there was more than just public reaction. The yacht revelations also touched on the private dynamics of the couple's relationship. Imagine being Harry, hearing that the life your spouse once led was far more complex, nuanced, and potentially controversial than you knew. Add in the whispers about other powerful figures, private interactions, and secrets that had been buried, and it becomes a maelstrom of emotion, anger, curiosity, fear, and a desperate need for clarity. Sarah Ferguson, in recounting the story, didn't just outline the past. She hinted at choices, at dynamics, at moments that could have gone unnoticed but for the sharp eyes of insiders. She described interactions, glances, conversations, and decisions that painted a picture of a young woman navigating a world of privilege, opportunity, and moral complexity. Was it scandalous? Perhaps. Was it criminal? Insiders say no. But in the court of public opinion, nuance often evaporates, leaving only drama. And the media? They were ready. Once Ferguson's comments hit the public, every outlet, blog, and social channel dissected every possible implication. What did this mean for Meghan's image? For Harry's loyalty? For the monarchy's reputation? Each headline was sharper than the last. Each story more sensationalized than the previous. The narrative spiraled, fueled not by facts alone, but by speculation, interpretation, and the human appetite for drama. Harry's reaction, insiders claim, was immediate. The first private conversations were intense, filled with questions, accusations, and the kind of raw emotion that the public rarely sees from royals. The couple argued. Harry demanded clarity. Meghan defended herself. The tension was palpable, charged with the weight of family, public perception, and private betrayal, or what Harry perceived as betrayal. Every statement, every expression, Every defensive gesture added fuel to the fire. Now imagine the scene. Harry pacing, voice raised but controlled, emotions raw. Meghan sitting, poised yet frustrated, attempting to contextualize choices made long before their life together. Choices that now carried implications for the present. Sarah Ferguson's revelations were not a casual comment. They were a catalyst. The conversation escalated, crossing the line from calm discussion to heated confrontation. Words were exchanged that would later echo in palace corridors, whispers that could never be fully contained, not with the global media waiting. But the story didn't stop at yacht parties. Ferguson, knowingly or not, opened a door to further revelations. Hints about relationships with other high-profile figures, implications about personal decisions, and questions that could not be answered without confrontation. The tension between Harry and Meghan reached a boiling point. The revelation wasn't just about the past. It was about trust, understanding, and whether the couple could navigate an increasingly complex web of public scrutiny and private history. Here's a question for the audience. How would you react if a trusted friend or relative revealed a part of your partner's past you never knew? Would it matter if it was harmless, scandalous, or somewhere in between? Would your instinct be anger, curiosity, or betrayal? Harry's reaction encompassed all three. He faced not only the shock of revelation, but the pressure of legacy, expectation, and a life that had already been under a microscope. As the confrontation unfolded, there were moments of silence, tension so thick it was almost tangible. Eyes met, expressions hardened, words were weighed carefully. Meghan explained, justified, contextualized. Harry listened, sometimes nodding, sometimes interrupting, but always processing the gravity of the situation. The yacht revelation had done more than expose a secret. It had tested the foundation of their relationship. And just when it seemed the conversation might settle, Ferguson's comments took another twist. She alluded to a figure already notorious for scandal. A name that, when spoken in certain circles, causes immediate unease. Prince Andrew. Whispers of connections, insinuations, and questions that should have remained private suddenly entered the conversation. The room went still. The air grew heavy. Harry's anger shifted from past choices to present implications. His protective instincts kicked in. Every scenario ran through his mind. Every possibility weighed heavily. And this is where the chapter leaves us. The yacht revelation was not merely a story from the past. It was a trigger. It ignited arguments, emotional confrontations, and questions about loyalty, trust, and public perception. It challenged the couple, the family, and the media's understanding of what was private and what was fair game. And just when the tension seemed unbearable, the question arose: how far does the past reach? How much does it define the present? And what happens when secrets collide with public scrutiny? The answer is coming. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What do you do when someone you love is suddenly thrust into a storm of scandal? Not a rumor, not a passing headline, but a detailed revelation from someone who knows the family, knows the inner workings, and isn't afraid to speak? For Prince Harry, that moment came with Sarah Ferguson's disclosure about Meghan's past on a yacht. And his reaction, it was immediate, explosive, and deeply human. It started quietly, almost innocuously. A private message, a phone call, a whispered warning. Something that hinted at the story before the full details reached him. Then, the moment of impact. Harry read the words, the implications hitting him like a punch he hadn't expected. Anger flared. Confusion followed. Protective instincts kicked into overdrive. Every fiber of his being wanted to defend Meghan, but also to understand the choices, the context, the implications. Imagine the setting: a quiet room, away from prying eyes, a moment meant for privacy. But now charged with tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Harry's face, usually calm in public, contorted with emotion, fury, disbelief, frustration. Meghan, on the other side, poised yet wary, realizing the storm about to hit wasn't external, it was in her own living room. What did she say? Harry demanded. His voice wasn't raised at first, but there was an edge, a sharpness, an intensity that made the question more than rhetorical. Meghan hesitated, weighing every word. She knew that anything she said could escalate the situation further. Yet honesty was required. Transparency was necessary, even if it was painful. Ferguson's revelations weren't just about glamour and yachts. They implied judgment, scrutiny, and perhaps insinuations about behaviors that, while not illegal, carried social and moral weight in royal circles. Harry's mind raced. Was this about protecting Meghan's image, or was it about shielding the family? Could the public handle the truth? Could the monarchy withstand another scandal layered on top of decades of scrutiny and missteps? And then the argument began, not in shouts at first, but in the way that tempers flare quietly, the undercurrent of tension building until it erupts. Harry's words, sharp and precise, cut through the room. How could she say that? How could she expose you like this? He paced, frustration evident in every movement. Meghan tried to calm him, to contextualize the story, to explain nuances he might not have understood. But emotion overshadowed reason. Here's a fact that might surprise you. Insiders claim that Harry's fury wasn't just about Meghan. It was about the family, the institution, the way private lives could be weaponized by those with proximity and influence. He had seen it before. He had felt it before. This was history repeating itself in a new, deeply personal way. The past colliding with the present. The public encroaching on private life. The weight of legacy pressing down. Questions shot across the room like lightning. Why now? Why bring this up after all this time? What did she hope to accomplish? Is this about you, or is this about the monarchy? Every question was loaded, every answer fraught with tension. Meghan's attempts at explanation were met with both understanding and frustration. She tried to illustrate context, intentions, and circumstances, but the weight of perception, public scrutiny, and Harry's protective instinct created friction. Emotions escalated. Harry's voice, usually composed, rose in frustration. Do you realize what this could do? His words weren't just about Meghan. They were about history, about media, about the relentless gaze of a world that rarely forgives. His hands gestured, his pacing intensified, the room itself almost vibrating with tension. Meghan, trying to maintain composure, met his fury with calm reasoning, but each point was a spark in a room already charged with emotion. Then came the personal attack, not directed at Meghan, but implied in the gravity of Ferguson's comments and the context surrounding them. Prince Andrew's name surfaced. The suggestion, the whisper, the question that hung in the air like a guillotine over the conversation. Harry's reaction shifted again. From anger to incredulity, from protective instinct to outright disbelief. He had faced scandals before, navigated them publicly, and emerged bruised but determined. But now, the implications touched someone he loved deeply, in a way that was intimate, immediate, and threatening. The dialogue became a mix of accusation and defense. Why didn't anyone tell me? I told you everything I could. This changes nothing. It could change everything. The cadence, the rhythm, the highs and lows of their exchange mirrored the intensity of the revelations themselves. Short, punchy lines punctuated by longer reflections. Emotional beats shifted rapidly, from fear to anger, from hurt to defiance. Every statement carried weight, every pause spoke volumes. And here's where the contrast becomes dramatic. Harry, the man who had served in combat zones, faced life-or-death situations, and navigated global attention, now found himself in the battlefield of intimacy, trust, and public scrutiny. Meghan, meanwhile, navigated criticism, judgment, and public fascination, yet was simultaneously defending herself in a way that required both vulnerability and strength. The confrontation became more than words. It became a test of loyalty, love, and endurance. Direct question for the audience. If you were in Harry's position, hearing about past behavior that could be misinterpreted by the public, would you snap? Or would you wait, analyze, and strategize? The human reaction is messy. It's emotional. It's unpredictable. And that's what makes this story gripping. Because in these moments, the public rarely sees raw truth, just curated responses. But here, behind closed doors, everything was raw, unfiltered, and volatile. As the conversation intensified, words shifted to strategy. How could they respond? What should be said publicly? What remained private? Each decision carried risk. One wrong move could escalate speculation, fuel gossip, or even invite the very scrutiny they feared. The stakes were not hypothetical. They were immediate, tangible, and intensely personal. Every statement, every pause, every look could be misinterpreted. Then came the crescendo, the moment when emotion eclipsed reasoning. Harry, in frustration and fury, demanded clarity, truth, and transparency. Meghan, equally determined, tried to assert context, perspective, and history. The tension in the room became almost cinematic, sharply contrasting human emotions, motivations, and stakes. The air was thick with accusation, defense, disbelief, and love all at once. And just when the argument seemed like it might reach some form of resolution, the conversation took another turn. A detail from Ferguson's revelation hinted at something even deeper, something connecting not just Meghan's past to Harry's present, but to the broader web of royal controversy. The implications were immediate, and the weight of the question landed like a hammer. How far does this go? How many secrets are still hidden, waiting for exposure? The room fell silent. For a moment, all that existed was tension, history, and the unspoken fear of public fallout. Harry's face, a mask of fury moments ago, now held uncertainty. Meghan, steady yet internally shaken, realized that the story was far from over. Every revelation, every detail, every insinuation had consequences they could not yet fully measure. And that is where this chapter leaves us. Harry's furious reaction was more than anger. It was a catalyst. It set off a chain of events that would ripple through their private lives, the royal family, and the public perception of them both. The confrontation wasn't just about the yacht revelations. It was about trust, loyalty, protection, and the enduring challenge of maintaining personal life under relentless global scrutiny. But what came next would push Harry to a breaking point, and the revelation waiting just beyond this confrontation would shock everyone. What happens when the world turns its gaze on someone, and every past action, every choice, every rumor is scrutinized, dissected, and debated? For Meghan Markle, the yacht revelations weren't just a headline. They were a flashpoint, a spark that ignited a firestorm across the media, social platforms, and public discourse, placing her squarely in the crosshairs of judgment, speculation, and controversy. Imagine the headlines: Duchess of Mystery, Meghan's hidden life on a luxury yacht, secrets of the Duchess exposed. From Hollywood to high seas, Meghan's untold story. The framing was sensational, calculated, and relentless. And social media? Merciless. Tweets, posts, memes, and opinion pieces multiplied exponentially. Every detail of Meghan's past, interpreted and reinterpreted, became fodder for debate. Defenders and critics clashed online, turning the story into a cultural phenomenon. Yet beyond the digital noise, the personal impact was profound. Meghan found herself caught between defending her past and navigating the anger and protectiveness of Harry. Her private life, meticulously managed and often shielded, was suddenly under a magnifying glass. Every decision she had made, choices about her career, her relationships, her public persona, was now being reevaluated in the light of Ferguson's revelations. Imagine receiving calls from advisors, friends, and well-meaning confidants, each offering guidance, judgment, or speculation. Imagine the frustration of knowing that even your closest allies might misinterpret your choices. The pressure is unimaginable, and for someone like Meghan, who has spent years managing the delicate balance between public perception and private reality, the challenge was unprecedented. Public reaction was polarized. Some applauded her independence and resilience, highlighting that anyone navigating elite social circles inevitably makes complex choices. They argued that Meghan's past was a testament to ambition, courage, and agency. Others saw scandal, impropriety, and behavior inconsistent with the image of a royal consort. For every supportive headline, there was a counter-article, each pushing the narrative further into controversy. And while Meghan navigated public scrutiny, the private stakes were just as high. Harry's fury, his protective instinct, and his emotional reactions were not just about the past. They were about perception, legacy, and loyalty. Meghan had to defend herself against insinuations she hadn't anticipated in ways that required clarity, strength, and composure. Every word mattered. Every explanation could be twisted. Every defensive gesture became fodder for speculation. Then came the press conferences, the interviews, and the op-eds. The media capitalized on Ferguson's revelations, dissecting her every statement, questioning motives, and highlighting contradictions, real or perceived. Meghan's life became a case study in public scrutiny, her wardrobe choices analyzed for hidden messages, her expressions on camera interpreted as guilt or defiance, her every smile or pause dissected. The intensity was relentless, unyielding, and deeply personal. What's astonishing is the emotional toll. Sources close to Meghan describe moments of exhaustion, frustration, and anxiety. The scrutiny wasn't just professional, it was personal. Social media attacks became relentless, combining rumor, exaggeration, and outright fabrication. Her past was treated not as a narrative, but as a weapon against her. And in the eye of the storm, Meghan had to maintain composure, not just for public appearances, but for Harry, for their children, and for herself. Direct question for the audience. How would you react if the world judged every past choice you had made, even long before the life you live today? How do you defend yourself when perception is stronger than reality? This is exactly the position Meghan found herself in, a high-stakes test of resilience, composure, and strategy. The irony wasn't lost on her. For someone who had fought hard to control her narrative, to carve a space independent of the pressures of royalty, this scandal threatened to undo years of careful effort. Every carefully crafted public appearance, every philanthropic effort, every attempt to balance family and public duties suddenly seemed overshadowed by a single revelation. A yacht party, a whispered accusation, a headline that spread like wildfire. And then there were the contradictions. Public perception versus private reality. The media's portrayal versus the truth of the situation. Meghan had to navigate a landscape where nuance rarely survived. Every explanation she offered was interpreted, often incorrectly. Every attempt at clarification risked inflaming the fire further. Her every word became a strategic choice, a delicate balance between honesty, defense, and protection. At the same time, emotional beats intensified. Meghan wasn't just managing public opinion. She was managing personal relationships. Her interactions with Harry, with palace staff, and with advisors were shaped by this newfound scrutiny. Tension grew, sometimes erupting into arguments or quiet moments of frustration. The stress of public life, the pressure to protect herself and her family, and the persistent scrutiny created an emotional landscape that was both complex and exhausting. Ferguson's revelations also opened the door to long-standing whispers about the connections between Meghan, powerful social circles, and controversial figures. Every insinuation, every hint, became fodder for interpretation. The stakes were no longer just personal. They were political, social, and historical. Every decision Meghan made, every reaction she offered, could shift public opinion, alter alliances, or spark further speculation. Yet Meghan also displayed remarkable resilience. She maintained composure, continued her public duties, and engaged with her philanthropic work, all while navigating an unprecedented level of scrutiny. The balance was delicate, the stakes immense, and the pressure unrelenting. Emotional moments were inevitable: frustration, anger, sadness, and occasional relief. But through it all, she demonstrated a capacity to endure scrutiny and criticism while maintaining her own sense of agency. Then came the subtle shifts in public perception. Supporters amplified her side of the story, highlighting resilience, strength, and authenticity. Critics dug deeper, analyzing motives, relationships, and history. Media outlets, some sympathetic, some hostile, fueled the fire, ensuring that Meghan remained at the center of conversation. Every headline, tweet, and post became part of a narrative she could not fully control. And just when it seemed the storm might begin to settle, Ferguson hinted at something even more provocative: a connection to Prince Andrew, a whisper that threatened to overshadow everything else. The implications were immediate and explosive. Harry's protective instincts flared again. Meghan, already under immense scrutiny, now faced questions about alliances, relationships, and perceptions that she had no control over. At this point, the pressure reached a critical point. Every conversation, every explanation, every private discussion carried weight. The media, public, and even family members watched, waiting for a slip, a reveal, or a misstep. The emotional stakes were at their peak, and the room, both literal and metaphorical, was charged with tension. And here is the cliffhanger. Just as Meghan began to assert control over the narrative, a private message arrived, one that threatened to upend everything she thought she had managed. The storm was far from over, and the next revelation would change the trajectory of both her public and private life forever. What happens when the past refuses to stay buried? When whispers, rumors, and allegations, once confined to hushed conversations, suddenly resurface in the most public, explosive way. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, that moment arrived not with a gentle nudge, but with a jarring jolt. Sarah Ferguson's insinuation linking Meghan to Prince Andrew, a name already synonymous with scandal and controversy. Imagine the scene. Harry and Meghan, already reeling from the yacht revelations, sitting in a quiet room where every word feels magnified, every glance analyzed, every pause loaded with tension. Then comes the question, simple in structure, devastating in implication. You slept with Andrew? The weight of it hangs in the air, invisible but palpable, like a storm cloud ready to break. Silence fills the room. Time stretches unnaturally, and suddenly, the world, in that moment, feels both impossibly large and suffocatingly small. The immediate reaction is shock, stark, unfiltered, and raw. Harry freezes, his protective instincts colliding with disbelief. Meghan's expression is calm but guarded, a mask carefully constructed over years of scrutiny. The room becomes a pressure cooker of emotions. Anger, fear, frustration, and confusion all vying for dominance. What makes this revelation different from the yacht scandal is not just its sensational nature, but the personal stakes. It's not about luxury or image. It's about the presence of another controversial figure in the narrative, someone whose past scandals have already cast long, dark shadows over the royal family. Insiders reveal that Harry's fury was immediate. Not at Meghan herself, but at the audacity of Ferguson's insinuation, at the potential damage to their lives, and at the unsettling implications that this connection, real or fabricated, could have. The question wasn't merely provocative, it was dangerous. It threatened reputations, relationships, and, most critically, trust. Harry's protective instincts, already on high alert, flared into overdrive. Meghan's response, measured yet firm, tried to address the claim without escalating the confrontation. She explained, contextualized, and countered insinuations with facts. But the nature of Ferguson's question, loaded, suggestive, and impossible to ignore, ensured that the tension remained high. Every explanation was dissected, every nuance questioned. And in the background, the relentless gaze of media speculation hovered, ready to turn private moments into global headlines. Now consider the psychological impact. For Harry, this wasn't just about reputation. It was about history, perception, and protection. Prince Andrew's past controversies were widely publicized, fraught with allegations, legal scrutiny, and public outrage. Any perceived connection, even indirect or rumored, had the potential to destroy credibility, fuel media frenzy, and implicate the couple in scandal. The stakes were monumental. Harry's protective instinct collided with strategic thinking, his mind racing through every possible outcome. And for Meghan, the moment was equally charged. Already under fire for her past on the yacht, she now faced an allegation tied to a figure notorious in royal history. The emotional intensity was immense. She had to navigate both truth and perception, defending herself while maintaining composure, all under the relentless gaze of a partner who oscillated between anger, disbelief, and fierce protectiveness. Every word mattered. Every misstep could be magnified, misinterpreted, and weaponized. Direct question for the audience. How would you respond if an insinuation about your past threatened to unravel not only your reputation, but also the life of the person you love? Could you remain composed, articulate, and strategic, or would emotion take control? This is precisely the challenge Meghan faced, a delicate balance of defense, clarity, and emotional regulation under unprecedented pressure. The implications of Ferguson's question extended beyond personal confrontation. The media was poised to interpret, amplify, and sensationalize every nuance. Every private conversation risked becoming public spectacle. Every defensive gesture, hesitant glance, or carefully chosen word could be misconstrued. The couple's very privacy, carefully guarded, became a liability in the face of insinuation and rumor. Harry's reaction wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Sources close to the couple describe him pacing, voice low but intense, as he weighed every option. How to respond publicly, how to navigate the inevitable headlines, how to protect Meghan without inflaming the situation. Each consideration carried consequences that extended beyond the immediate moment. This was no longer a simple argument. It was a crisis management scenario, unfolding in real time, with historical implications and personal stakes intertwined. And then came the private reckoning. The conversation shifted from immediate outrage to reflection. Harry and Meghan discussed the implications of public perception, the potential fallout, and the emotional toll of enduring another layer of scrutiny. They weighed past choices, present vulnerabilities, and the risk of future exposure. The dialogue was intense, introspective, and sometimes painful, revealing the human cost of life in the spotlight. But the pressure wasn't limited to emotional strain. Legal considerations, media strategy, and public narrative all came into play. Advisors whispered about potential consequences. Friends debated the best approach. And the couple themselves faced a choice: confront the insinuation head-on, deflect, or remain silent and risk speculation. Each option carried risks, none without consequences. As the conversation unfolded, the broader context of royal history loomed large. Prince Andrew's past was not simply scandalous. It was emblematic of the intense scrutiny, public mistrust, and ethical controversies that have shaped the monarchy over decades. Any alleged connection, no matter how tenuous, risked reigniting those controversies, dragging Harry and Meghan into a maelstrom they had spent years trying to navigate carefully. The stakes were enormous, both personally and institutionally. Then came the emotional pivot. Harry, frustrated but resolute, demanded clarity, not just for himself, but for the protection of Meghan and their family. Meghan, in turn, sought to assert agency, clarify context, and defend against insinuation. The exchange became a complex dance of emotion, strategy, and honesty. Every pause carried weight. Every glance was scrutinized. Every word became a potential headline. And here's the cliffhanger. Just when it seemed they might find some footing, Ferguson hinted at yet another layer of information. Something that linked past events, yacht parties, and private interactions to a revelation that neither Harry nor Meghan had anticipated. The question wasn't over. The story was far from finished. And what came next would escalate the tension to a level neither of them could have imagined. When news, or even the whisper of news, reaches the walls of the palace, it doesn't arrive quietly. It lands like a thunderclap, reverberating through corridors, offices, and private chambers. The yacht revelations about Meghan, coupled with Ferguson's insinuation about Prince Andrew, were no exception. Inside Buckingham, Kensington, and Windsor, reactions ranged from disbelief to alarm, from strategic calculation to quiet fury. And Harry and Meghan, already navigating their own private storm, now faced the challenge of a family grappling with the potential fallout. Imagine the scene. Senior aides huddled in offices, phones buzzing, couriers bringing memos and messages. Every word of Ferguson's revelations was dissected, every potential headline analyzed. Advisors debated the impact not just on Meghan, but on Harry, the monarchy, and the institution's fragile public image. The yacht story wasn't just gossip. It was a crisis scenario, unfolding in real time, and everyone in the palace chain of command felt the pressure. One of the most surprising elements insiders describe is the mix of concern and disbelief. Some family members were furious, not at Meghan, but at the audacity of the information being revealed and the potential damage it could cause. Others were worried about Harry, who had already demonstrated intense emotional reactions. Advisors worried that the public might misinterpret his defensiveness as guilt or scandal rather than the protective instinct they knew it to be. Every conversation inside the palace was charged with tension, secrecy, and high stakes. And then there's the media factor. The palace has always understood the power of headlines, of perception, of narrative control. But in this case, the narrative was spiraling beyond their control. Ferguson's revelation acted as a catalyst, a trigger for tabloids, social media, and global press to interpret, exaggerate, and sensationalize every detail. Internal palace strategy meetings were immediately convened. Damage control, clarification, potential public statements, and the delicate balance between defense and discretion were all debated intensely. A crucial point in palace reactions was the concern over Prince Andrew. His past scandals were already an ongoing challenge for the monarchy. The mere insinuation that Meghan had any connection with him, even if completely unfounded, was treated as a serious issue. Sources indicate that private briefings were conducted, family members were alerted, and contingency plans discussed. The fear wasn't just for Meghan or Harry. It was for the institution itself. Every revelation risked fueling public distrust, speculation, and historical critique. Then there were emotional reactions behind closed doors. Family members, while maintaining composure in public, reportedly reacted with shock, concern, and frustration in private. The palace, an institution built on tradition, protocol, and image, had to navigate a situation that defied easy resolution. How do you address rumors and insinuations without amplifying them? How do you protect individuals while maintaining institutional credibility? Every decision carried risk, and the pressure to respond correctly was immense. Direct question for the audience. If you were in a position where your family's reputation, legacy, and public perception could be instantly altered by one person's revelation, what would you do? Stay silent, confront the issue, or attempt a carefully staged response? The palace faced exactly this dilemma, a high-stakes balancing act with no easy answers. Some palace insiders reportedly urged restraint, arguing that any acknowledgement might lend credibility to the allegations. Others pushed for proactive clarification to protect Meghan, Harry, and the broader family image. The debate wasn't just about facts. It was about perception, optics, and the unpredictable ways the public would interpret each move. And as often happens in crises like these, the clock is merciless. Every minute of delay risks misinterpretation. Every statement risks misrepresentation. Emotionally, the situation took a toll. Senior staff members described tense moments in private meetings, raised voices, and heated debates over wording and strategy. The palace had to manage not just the facts, but the human element. Anger, fear, frustration, and even betrayal, all swirling together in a delicate, explosive mix. And amidst all of this, Harry and Meghan were navigating their own private confrontations, making palace advisors' jobs exponentially more complicated. The stakes were amplified by the global spotlight. The monarchy operates on tradition, ceremony, and careful narrative control, but the modern world, with social media, instantaneous news cycles, and global scrutiny, changes everything. No private conversation remains private. Every misstep, hesitation, or perceived contradiction can become viral fodder. The palace, aware of this reality, moved with caution, but even careful moves carry risk. Another layer of complexity, allies and critics within the institution. Not everyone agreed on how to respond. Some family members were sympathetic to Meghan, understanding the personal cost and emotional strain of the allegations. Others were critical, emphasizing the potential damage to the monarchy and public perception. This internal tension created an environment where every statement, every decision, and every delay carried enormous weight. Insiders also point to the psychological toll. Staff members, advisors, and family members described sleepless nights, constant monitoring of media coverage, and urgent strategic discussions. The palace isn't just a building. It's an ecosystem of responsibility, legacy, and expectation. And when revelations like Ferguson's hit, the entire system responds in unison, often chaotically, to protect the institution while managing human emotions. Amid all this, Harry and Meghan's private experience continued to collide with public narrative. Each interaction with advisors, each statement from family members, and every media report intensified the pressure. The couple had to navigate not just their own emotions, but also the expectations, calculations, and strategic priorities of the palace. The stakes were personal, relational, and institutional, all at once. Direct question for the audience. Can an institution like the monarchy survive when private lives, personal scandals, and public scrutiny intersect at such intensity? Can individuals protect themselves while protecting an institution centuries in the making? The palace faced this question in real time, every move scrutinized, every decision debated, every reaction amplified. And here's the cliffhanger. As palace staff scrambled to assess the damage and advise the family, Harry made a decision, a move that would escalate tensions further, challenge loyalties, and push Meghan into the next chapter of scrutiny. The storm was far from over, and what came next would change everything for the couple, and for the monarchy itself. What happens when a story is too explosive to be contained? When whispers in private rooms explode into headlines across continents. For Harry and Meghan, Ferguson's revelations about Meghan's yacht past and the insinuation regarding Prince Andrew ignited a media firestorm the moment it surfaced. And once the story hit, there was no turning back. Picture the scene. Newsrooms buzzing, social media notifications exploding, influencers and tabloids dissecting every word. Journalists raced to verify facts, spin narratives, and break exclusives. Within hours, every possible angle had been explored. Meghan's past, Harry's reaction, the palace's internal turmoil, and the looming shadow of Prince Andrew's history. Headlines screamed for attention. Duchess under fire. Secrets exposed. Harry's fury as Meghan's past revealed. Andrew allegations resurface. Royal scandal intensifies. The frenzy wasn't just about facts, it was about perception. Each article, tweet, or Instagram post had the power to shape public opinion, inflame controversy, and amplify emotions. Social media became a battleground. Hashtags trended globally. Memes proliferated. Online debates raged between defenders and critics of Meghan, between those sympathetic to Harry's protective instincts and those critical of the couple's choices. The story went viral, almost uncontrollably, feeding on its own momentum. Behind the headlines, Harry and Meghan watched the storm unfold. The personal confrontation they had just endured now collided with public scrutiny on a scale they had only experienced in other major media events. Every moment was amplified, every reaction analyzed, every statement dissected. The media frenzy transformed private emotions into a spectacle, a relentless cycle of exposure, interpretation, and judgment. What made this frenzy so intense was the combination of scandal, human drama, and historical context. Meghan's yacht past carried glamour, luxury, and intrigue. The insinuation regarding Prince Andrew added a layer of historical scandal, reminding the world of past royal controversies. Together, they created a perfect storm for media consumption, a narrative that combined celebrity allure, emotional conflict, and institutional tension. Insiders reveal that the couple struggled to manage the media's intensity. Calls from PR teams, advisors, and friends flooded in constantly. Every move had to be calculated, whether to respond, clarify, or remain silent. Missteps could be magnified. Silence could be interpreted as guilt. Any reaction carried enormous risk, both personally and for the monarchy. It was a high-stakes balancing act with no easy solutions. Direct question for the audience. If you were thrust into a media frenzy where every personal choice was scrutinized, every private conversation potentially leaked, how would you react? Would you speak out, or stay silent and let the storm pass? For Harry and Meghan, the answer was complicated, and every decision carried consequences that rippled far beyond themselves. One of the most dramatic elements of the media frenzy was the speed at which narratives evolved. Early coverage focused on Meghan's yacht past. Within hours, speculation about Prince Andrew dominated discussions. Social media users filled in gaps with rumors, assumptions, and often exaggerated claims. Memes circulated that mixed humor with judgment, highlighting the public's fascination with scandal while increasing pressure on the couple. The frenzy was self-perpetuating, feeding on every new revelation, response, or perceived misstep. Public reactions were just as intense. Supporters rallied online, defending Meghan and criticizing media intrusion. Critics analyzed the yacht revelations and Andrew insinuation as evidence of character flaws or poor judgment. Influencers and commentators weighed in, often amplifying conflict, framing it in ways that suited their narrative, and fueling emotional debates. The story became more than personal. It became cultural, political, and symbolic. The couple's response, or at times their inability to respond quickly enough, was also scrutinized. Harry's anger was interpreted in various ways: protective, defensive, or even reactive. Meghan's efforts to contextualize, clarify, or assert agency were dissected, criticized, or celebrated depending on the audience. Every move became a performance, every pause a signal, every word a headline. Meanwhile, palace insiders monitored the frenzy with a mix of concern and strategic calculation. The media had already shaped perception in ways that the palace could not fully control. Every rumor, every headline, every viral post carried implications for the monarchy's image. Advisors debated messaging, potential statements, and media strategies to contain the storm. But in the age of instantaneous communication, containment was nearly impossible. Emotionally, the couple faced relentless pressure. Sleepless nights, constant monitoring of media coverage, and the psychological toll of seeing private life dissected in public took a heavy weight. Insiders note moments of frustration, despair, and anger as Harry and Meghan struggled to maintain composure while navigating both personal and institutional stakes. The intensity of the media frenzy also exposed contradictions. Public defenders of Meghan often highlighted her independence and resilience, while critics emphasized perceived improprieties, missteps, or inconsistencies in her narrative. Every detail became fodder for debate. The media's framing often conflicted with private reality, deepening emotional strain for the couple. And just when it seemed the media storm had reached a temporary peak, Ferguson dropped another hint. One more revelation that suggested there were still hidden layers, undisclosed events, and consequences yet to emerge. The frenzy wasn't over, it was evolving. And the next wave threatened to escalate the situation even further, pushing Harry and Meghan into uncharted territory. Here's the cliffhanger. As the media frenzy reached a global crescendo, a leaked document surfaced, an internal palace note that suggested the implications of Ferguson's revelations were far deeper than anyone imagined. The document hinted at connections, conversations, and decisions that could redefine the story entirely. And what came next would make the world stop and take notice. In today's world, a scandal isn't just a headline. It's a tidal wave of tweets, posts, comments, and videos that wash over the internet in seconds. For Meghan Markle, the yacht revelations and Ferguson's insinuation about Prince Andrew didn't just generate traditional media coverage. They ignited a social media backlash the likes of which few public figures experience. And once the backlash began, there was no turning back. Imagine opening your phone and seeing notifications pouring in nonstop. Millions of eyes scrutinizing, judging, and reacting. Memes, hashtags, viral threads, GIFs, and commentary flooded platforms around the globe. Some were supportive, defending Meghan's choices, character, and integrity. Others were scathing, painting her as manipulative, opportunistic, or worse. Every post was amplified, shared, and dissected, creating a feedback loop that increased pressure on the couple exponentially. This wasn't just passive commentary. It was an active, relentless engagement. Social media users debated morality, privilege, and intent. Critics mined the yacht revelations and the Andrew insinuation for insinuations of scandal. Supporters countered with messages of empowerment, independence, and resilience. The narrative fractured across platforms, communities, and cultures, each interpreting events through their own lens, often amplifying misinformation along the way. Direct question for the audience. If your past were suddenly exposed and dissected by millions of strangers worldwide, how would you respond? Would you engage, defend, or retreat? Social media leaves almost no room for privacy, context, or nuance. And for Meghan and Harry, every reaction, or lack thereof, became subject to interpretation, misinterpretation, and amplification. The emotional toll was immense. Insiders report Meghan experiencing anxiety, frustration, and moments of despair as the backlash escalated. Even small gestures, facial expressions, or social media activity were scrutinized, reinterpreted, and weaponized. For Harry, watching the woman he loved endure such public scrutiny intensified his protective instincts, fueling frustration, anger, and a deep desire to control the narrative. The nature of social media backlash is uniquely viral. Posts spread like wildfire, sometimes entirely detached from reality. Every rumor, every exaggeration, every insinuation circulated rapidly, often gaining more attention than factual reporting. Memes